The knock came like a gunshot in the dark, sharp enough to wake the house and the man inside it. And when he opened the door, he expected trouble. Not a girl no older than 14, with snow in her hair and fear so bright in her eyes it hurt to look at. She stood barefoot on the frozen step, holding a torn sack to her chest, and said, "Ma's sick and we're out of bread," her voice breaking as if the words themselves were heavier than she could carry. Behind her the night pressed close, wolves crying somewhere far off, the wind worrying the eaves like it meant to tear the house apart. And for one breath, the Richest, man in the territory, considered closing the door and letting the world stay outside, where it belonged. His name was Elias Crow, and everything he owned had been earned by never letting strangers cross his threshold. Yet the girl did not beg, did not cry. She only stood there shaking, waiting for an answer she clearly expected to be no. He smelled fever on her, and smoke and something else, a bitter metallic tang that made his hand tighten on the doorframe. He asked where she lived, and she pointed toward the timberline where no lights burned, where no sane person built a cabin. And when he told her to wait, he meant it to be the end of it, meant to bring back a loaf and shut the door forever. But when he turned, the girl whispered that Ma had stopped breathing once already, just for a moment, and the house seemed to tilt, memories long buried shifting under his feet like rot beneath a floorboard. He returned with bread, meat, a bottle of laudanum he had sworn never to touch again, and instead of handing them over, he pulled on his coat and told her to lead the way, shocking himself more than her. The path was worse than he expected, drift swallowing his boots, the cold biting deep, and when they reached the cabin he understood the smell at last, for blood stained the snow, and the door hung open as if something had fled in a hurry. Inside, the girl's mother lay on a pallet, grey-lipped and burning hot, a knife wound badly stitched, and as Elias knelt to help, her eyes snapped open with terror, not relief, and she croaked his name like a curse, proving that this meeting was no accident at all. Elias froze, because no one out here should know his name, not spoken with that kind of history in it, and the girl stared between them as if watching a trap spring. The woman tried to push herself up, failed, and hissed that he should leave before they all paid for his mercy, that men were already hunting and would smell his wealth like blood. He demanded who had hurt her, and she laughed weakly, saying the same men who once shook his hand and toasted his success, the same men he ruined when he bought their land and starved their cattle out, the same men who now wanted what he kept locked in his cellar. Elias worked fast, cleaning the wound, nosing her carefully, his mind racing as pieces slid into place, realizing the girl had been sent because she was small enough to pass unseen, brave enough to knock. Outside a branch snapped, then another, deliberate, and he killed the lamp, heart hammering as shadows crossed the frost-blurred window. The woman clutched his sleeve and whispered that they would burn the cabin with them inside if he stayed, that the bread was bait and she was sorry. The girl backed toward him, eyes wide, and in that moment Elias understood the final cost of all he owned, understood that the walls he built to keep the world out had also kept him alone when it mattered most. He barred the door, lifted the rifle from its hooks, and waited in the dark as footsteps circled, knowing that once the first shot was fired, there would be no turning back for any of them. The wind rose, carrying smoke and voices, and Elias smiled grimly, because he had one last secret left to spend, and this time he would spend it to the end. He checked the door, steadied his breath, and prepared to make the night remember his name. Tonight, the first torch flared against the window like a sunrise gone wrong, and Elias fired before the glass could shatter, the rifle's crack tearing the night open and sending a scream spinning into the trees, after which everything went quiet, enough that he could hear the girl's breath hitch behind him. Smoke curled in through the cracks, sharp and choking, and he moved fast, dragging the table against the door, stamping out embers with his coat while the woman on the pallet moaned and clutched her side. Viva dreams mixing with the present until she sobbed that this was how it ended. Elias told her it wasn't, though he wasn't sure he believed it. And when another torch hit the roof, he kicked, opened the back wall panel he'd noticed earlier, a hunter's escape, half buried by years of neglect. He shoved the girl through first, pressed bread and the bottle into her arms, then lifted her mother with a grunt that sent pain lancing up his spine, lowering her into the tunnel just as flames began to chew through the rafters. They crawled blind and coughing, dirt in their mouths, the heat roaring behind them, until they burst out into the timber where snow smothered the firelight, and the shouts turned, confused and angry. Elias did not stop, did not look back, following an old line he'd cut years ago for smuggling goods. No one was meant to see, a path even his enemies didn't know he had kept. The girl stumbled, and he caught her without thinking, a simple human reflex that startled him more than the danger. And when they reached a hollow, choked with deadfall, he hid them beneath branches. While riders thundered, passed so close he could smell their horses, only then did he let himself breathe. Only then did the woman's eyes clear enough to look at him properly. And what he saw there was not hatred, but a terrible relief. She told him the men wanted the deeds he kept locked away, proof of their crimes, proof that the land had been stolen with blood money, and that she had been his bookkeeper once, before she ran, before she married, before everything fell apart. Elias closed his eyes because he remembered her now, remembered trusting the wrong people and choosing silence when he could have stopped them. And the weight of that choice settled heavy on his chest. Dawn crept pale through the trees as the fever broke, and with it came the sounds of pursuit fading, the hunters believing the fire had done its work. Elias led them to his hidden cellar beneath the big house, past the iron door no one had ever opened but him, and there he laid out the papers, the gold, the truth, telling the girl to read the names and remember them. When the law arrived days later, drawn by anonymous letters and a sudden flood of evidence, the territory shook, fortunes collapsed, and Elias Crow vanished, declared dead in a cabin fire. The girl and her mother lived on land returned to them, and years later, when a quiet man brought bread to their door in winter and never gave his name, the girl smiled, because some debts are paid not with wealth, but with the courage to finally open the door. They thought the story was finished when the trials ended and the nooses were cut down, but Elias knew better. Because men who lose everything do not forget, they wait, and waiting had always been his greatest skill. He stayed hidden on the edge of the territory, watching smoke rise from chimneys that once belonged to thieves, watching the girl grow taller and surer, watching her mother regain strength enough to laugh again. And each visit he brought bread, always bread, because that was how it had begun and how it would end. One winter evening, the girl followed him instead of closing the door, her footsteps light but determined. And when he turned, she held a folded paper in her hand. The last deed, the one he had kept back. She said the men were coming again. Not for land this time, but for him, because one of them had survived. The rope, and whispered his name like a promise of revenge. Elias took the paper and felt the old fear coil tight, but beneath it was something steadier, a resolve sharpened by the knowledge that running only delayed the reckoning. He told her to go inside, to bar the door and trust him one final time, and when she refused, he smiled sadly and said, "Then you'll see how it ends." He walked into town at dawn, straight to the sheriff's office, carrying the evidence and his true name, confessing to every lie that had built his fortune, every crime he had hidden behind gold. The town gathered like a storm, shocked by the man they had envied standing small and unarmed. And when the survivor burst from the crowd with a gun, Elias did not flinch, did not run, only spoke the truth loud enough that everyone heard. The shot rang out, the pain came hot and fast, and he fell knowing the law would finish what he started, knowing the girl would never have to knock on a door again. He did not die that day, though many said he should have, and in prison he gave away what remained of his wealth until there was nothing left to give. Years later, when the girl stood grown with children of her own and a full pantry behind her, she visited him one last time, placing a loaf of fresh bread in his hands. He laughed softly, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his face, because he understood at last that riches were never measured in land or gold. But in the moment a door opens when the world is cold. When Elias Crow died quietly in his cell, the territory remembered him not as the richest man it had known, but as the one who answered a knock and paid the price. And the girl closed her own door that night with a full heart, because the debt that began with hunger had been repaid with truth, and the story was finally mercifully over.